Welcome everyone today to the wonderful opportunity we have to hear Reverend Dr. Eric Sarwar, a long-term friend of mine. He will be speaking on the art of sacred sound in the Muslim context, Psalms and Islam. Before we begin and ask Eric to share with us, I want to give an introduction. Reverend Dr. Eric Sarwar, who is a gifted musician, songwriter, and the founding president of Tehillim School of Church Music and Worship, has over several decades dedicated himself to the playing and study of music in cross-cultural contexts. Dr. Sarwar has discovered along his journey that the Psalms in particular have a surprising language for Dr. Sarwar recently completed his PhD in intercultural studies at Fuller Theological Seminary, California, USA. His doctoral dissertation is entitled Psalms, Islam, and Salam, an exploration of the heritage of divine song. This particular dissertation offers resources for Christian, Muslim peacemaking through the sacred musical tradition of the Psalms. Dr. Sarwar also has a Master of Divinity degree from Gujranwala Theological Seminary in Pakistan. He has an MA degree in Islamic history from Karachi University and a THM degree in worship studies from Calvin Theological Seminary. Indeed, it was when he was studying at Calvin Theological Seminary that I had the wonderful privilege of meeting Dr. Eric Sarwar over 10 years ago, and through our common friend, Emily Brink. Now, I would like to move on to talk about some of Dr. Sarwar's publications. He has an online program, Zabur Zone, Psalms in a Punjabi Context, which is very well received in India. Indeed, he has also served as a member of the Hymn Society in the United States. He's presented multiple papers there. His most recent paper at the Centennial Celebration was Sub Sagam and Punjabi Sabur, Psalm 24, 7 through 10, Messianic and Missiological Perspective in the Indian Subcontinent. In 2022, Eric published Mer Magane Ke Li'e for the Minister Musician, an exposition of the Psalms of the sons of Kara, Asaph, Jeduthun, and Heman in Urdu. He's currently revising his doctoral dissertation for publication with Fortress Press in 2023. Dr. Sarwar himself plays the harmonium and is fluent in English, Hindi, Punjabi, and Urdu. Alongside teaching a D-Min cohort at Southern Florida Bible College and Seminary, Dr. Sarwar continues to sing the Psalms, produce festivals, lead a church at Artesia the Artesia Indo-Pak Church in Southern California, where he lives with his wife, Shumaila, and two sons, Gabriel and Ethan. So it is with great joy and celebration that I invite you to attend this talk today at the Oxford Interfaith Forum, The Art of Sacred Sound in the Muslim Context, Psalms and Islam. Dr. Sarwar.
Thank you very much, Dr. Diane, and it's indeed a pleasure to see you here, and Dr. Thea and all our distinguished community of scholars. Thank you very much for having me all the way. I am right now at Grand Rapids, Michigan, attending worship symposium. I just ran after giving a lecture on Psalms at Calvin University students, and I just occupying an office of my fellow Dr. John Whitwright here, professor of worship and theology in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Well, thank you very much. And Dr. Thea, it's indeed a pleasure to serve along with you. Before further ado, having this time, let me jump into my PowerPoint presentation, and then we will go through there. Okay, so as I have been invited to talk about the art of sacred sound in the Muslim context, which is Islam and Islam, but generally there is a misconception about the art in Islam. And what is that? Let me show you, because there is, okay. Now, you can see that generally you read news about attacks on artistic expression by the radical or extremist Muslims. Recently, Erica Lopez, Prater, a professor, is fired by a Hamline University over a medieval painting of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. She was fired by the government. And then we know that Rushdie has been attacked a few months ago in New York somewhere, and his book has still been under the suspicious, according to the Muslim scholars. Then Theo van Gogh, Dutch filmmaker, assassinated because of his artistic work. Bangladeshi poet Taslima Nasreen threatened to kill, and then Charlie Hebdo cartoon controversy. We see that around the world, there is lots of antagonism against the artistic expression, which is primarily graphic art or paintings art, which has been not accepted. And various people and friends ask question, why does Islam, a religion of peace, have these kind of attitude against artistic expression? People do ask, why do extremist Muslims kill innocent people in the name of Islam? What is the impetus behind violent radicals issuing fatwas and putting prices on the heads of painters, poets, and authors? Why are the jihadists so terrified by peaceful Sufi musicians and Shiite marsias and Soz singers that they target those artists and their shrines? What is the role of visual and vocal artists in Islam? And are there any patterns that consolidate the art in Muslim history and culture? So in my talk, I'm not going to the visual or the graphic art. My argument and my proposal is the original primary art of Islam is not vision-centric, it is voice-centric. It's a voice, it's a sound. So why it is there? So there's a spirituality of voice in Islamic thought. As it is said that the human voice is a crown of Islamic religious art. Vocal music was chief of art, song, and poetry during the Prophet's day and stayed in honor after even his lifeline. So that's why the culture, the pre-Islamic culture of the Arab Peninsula, it was oral, it was poetic, and it was filled with artistic expression. Ancient Arabs believed that the poet or the shair or shura, plural, and the musicians had special relationship with the spirits, unseen world, jinns. That was the general understanding, and acquired supernatural powers from them. Skillful poets epitomize classical poetry with rhythm and rhymes and enhance it by chanting it in a public notation. That's one of the reasons that even when the Quran came and the poetry recitation came, Prophet Muhammad was accused that he has been writing against he cannot compete with the Arab poetry level which the Arab poets have. So that's why there is an accusation and authenticity of the Quran. And it was so important that the 26th surah chapter of the Quran is entitled Surah Al-Shura, or the poets. That's chapter 26. The whole chapter has been given to the poets and the artists. So so we can see that it was so important in that time. So we can, Islamic spirituality, especially voice-centric Islamic spirituality, can classify it into four main categories. Number one, a Quran-centered spirituality, which is recitation, qiraat, and then the path to the holiness, to the pillars of Islam, that is the practical application, then spiritual life and imitation of Prophet Muhammad, and then the Sufi path to holiness. So these are various paths which we can see that Islam has relating to the spirituality. So today we will talking about primarily on the voice. So when we talk about the resources, what we are using, generally, yes, okay. So generally, the Muslim context and the Muslim resources, they draw their resources from historical resources. That's number one, we can see that. concerning the role of Islam, musical art in Islam, Muslim thought looked back to the 6th century, to the life of the Prophet, as it does for every social and religious practice. So in the Western region, the search began during the first half of the 19th century about the life and the resources about the Prophet and Islam. So the first academic biography written by Gustav Weil and published in 1843 was based on the Quran and Islamic sources dating from the 16th century onward. And during 19th century, manuscripts of early sources were discovered that dated 2 or 3 centuries after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. These become available all the beginning of the 20th century. So these were the primary resources from the Hadith tradition and the life of the Prophet. What can we learn from the life of the Prophet 6th century about the musical and vocal art in the Islamic tradition? So primary resources, and after primary resources, what are the foundations of visual and vocal art? So as I mentioned earlier, Islamic thought is based on 2 primary resources. Number 1, the book, the Quran, as divine revelation. And the second one is Hadith, or a record of the saying and action of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So when we talk about Quran, as we know that Quran is not a book, that's the misunderstanding. Mushaf is a book. Quran or Iqra, which it come the word Iqra or Qiraat, it is a voice, it is a style of cantillation, which we talk about Quran. Sometimes we think that Quran is a book. No, Quran is not book. Quran is what we recite or what we listen from the voice of the Qari. So, according to Islamic tradition, we know that the Quran, it was laid upon the heart of Prophet Muhammad when subsequently rehearsed with Angel Gabriel. So the Quran is considered as the sound of divine utterance, the sound of divine and the generating source that ultimately authority within Islam. So first thing we need to understand, voice is the primary source, chief. And then number 2, Quran means Iqra, recitation, not a book. So when did this happen? Generally, there is a journey night when we call Surah Al-Isra, or the journey to the Prophet, from the Prophet to the 7 heavens. It's mentioned in the Surah Israel, Surah 17, when the Prophet has a night journey and he reached to 7 heaven, and it's all story written in the history and in the Islam also. And he reportedly told his followers when he was sharing his experience, he said that sometime he heard a knell of bell prior to revelation, and the sound had a strong effect on him. So before getting a revelation, he always mentioning about a sound of a bell rang, and then he received the voice. So we can see that the sound is always a beginning of the revelation. Well, when we talk about art or the Islamic art, especially the visual art, the term Islamic art generally is not described the art created specifically in the service of the Muslim faith, for example, a mosque and its furnishing, but also characterize the art and architecture historically produced in the lands ruled by Muslims. So when we talk about visual art, it is the various forms. 4 basic components of Islamic ornament are calligraphy, vegetal patterns, geometric patterns, and figural, presents the influence of the Quranic text in Arabic. So you see whatever Islamic architect you see, whether it's a mahal or whether it's a masjid or whatever kind of a thing, you find that all these 4 patterns on the architect. But when we talk about the sonic art, when we talk about the vocal-centric art, there is a different scenario. Before diving into the canonical and non-canonical Islamic sonic art, in the pre-Islamic history, as I mentioned earlier, the poetry was the chief art. So in the history and the Arabic tradition, when poetry was a chief art and it was recited orally at a public context at Ukaz near Mecca, that was a city where these kind of artistic gatherings happen every year. And then there were 2 important genres in pre-Islamic poetic art. Number 1 was Rajaz, 4-syllable meter verses, their tempo fitted by the walking pace of camel. Anybody have ever walked or ridden on a camel? I did a couple of times. And because I'm a musician from Indian context, so Indian subcontinent, we call a rhythm pattern in a tabla and the rhythms which go with the walking and a pattern of the camel, and which we called Deep Chandi or Sitar Khan. That's the name of a rhythm, and it's go like this. I'll sing Psalm 121. It's on the same pattern in a Punjabi language, and it's like this. मदद लई मैं किसनू पुकारा. You can see, you feel you are sitting on a camel, and then you are, the rhythm pattern is going da ra da da ra da da ra da ra da ra da 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 da. So you see that the pattern and the step of the camel, kind of this. Then the qasida, number 2. Qasida is a different, it's a laudatory, elegiac, or satiric poem in Arabic poems of wayward mistress, desert adventures, and the hunting of the onaga. So this is qasida. But Rajaz and qasida was the common poetic themes in the pre-Islamic era of the Arab Peninsula. So when we talk about the Islamic religious art or the sacred sound, okay, I need to show you picture because this image is covering that picture. So you can see the picture. Oh, come on. That is the photo image of Bilal ibn Rabah, the first muazzin in the history, Islamic history. Can you see that image now? Oh yeah, it's there. Okay. Now, generally Islamic voice and vocal art started when we talk about the azan or adan, the muazzin. It was invented and created or accepted and then practiced in Medina, not in the Mecca. Although the Mecca, the Prophet's revelations and the recitation was already beginning, he was receiving chapters and the surahs, but the practice of azan started in the Medina when he migrated to Medina with his followers. So hijrah to Medina and dream of devotee. That's an interesting part. During my research, I learned that azan, the text of azan, is not in the Quran. So where did this come from? So one of my interviewee, he was the imam in the local mosque, Jamia Masjid in Karachi. He told me that actually azan was a dream of the followers. It was not come from the Prophet. That's interesting. That was the revelation to me, actually. And I said, wow, really? When did this happen? And I never heard. Although I grown up in Pakistan in Islamic context, you know, every day, every time I woke up with the 5 time of prayer call, and it was surrounded by the sonic and there were the cassettes and CDs playing on a shop's Quranic recitation, and then the majlis and everything. And I never realized that the call of prayer was not came from the Prophet, but from a dream of the followers. So, and Prophet initiated, accepted, and then that's why the African slave Bilal, he was the first muazzin in the Medina. So, so we all know there are 5 times of prayer. There are Fajr, which is pre-dawn, before sun, then Zohar, which is noon, then Asr, afternoon, Maghrib, sunset, and Isha, evening. If you are a musicologist, you will probably know and recognize that every 5 call of prayer have a different connotation and different tone and melodic structure. Not all 5 time of azan are the same. So they have a special name based on Middle Eastern music of maqam. Those who have listened various lecture from our rabbinic friends and our Muslim friends, they know that these 5 times of prayer have a various maqamat. Maqam is a music system in the Middle Eastern, and they are on that system. Let me give you Fajr orientation, what it looks like a Fajr on Maqam Hijaz. Maqam, as I mentioned earlier, it's a music system, and how the Fajr, early morning prayer, looks like. So God is great. That's Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la Allah, I give witness that there is one God.
أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول
So you have experienced that this is a morning Fajr azan. So if you go to the rest of 4, they all have different melodic structure. Generally, the Fajr has a more focus on the high notes, and then the maqamat in between the which we call shurtis, it's sliding down with the morning raga or the maqam in the Middle Eastern musical system. So this is the call of prayer, azan. So why it is on a qiraat, I should not. Okay, yeah, here we are. So adhan has also passed through various changes, including an addition to the dawn prayer call. The sound of azan ranges from pure intonation to elaborated melody. You might have experienced that sound. And depending on the vocal ability and training of the muazzin. The muazzin is a person who gives azan. That's called muazzin. So when we talk about azan, or as I was mentioning about the maqam system, the Hijaz maqam, or the morning Bhairo raga in Indian musicology, they are same actually. But when we talk about Arabic world music, that's very important to understand that mostly in a religious connotation, especially azan or the qiraat, Muslim scholar doesn't use word music because that's have a different connotation. So what they think that, what they're talking about. So the music has been defined almost exclusively as a vocal art, designated by the Arabic word ghina or song. Singing and music or musiqi are considered definitely unfit. So you need to understand the terminology, the term music or ghina, you cannot use that. So unfit for Muslim praying in a mosque or masjid. In the context of the masjid or context, the ulama, religious scholars, use different verbs such as padna in Urdu means primarily to read or recite, or tarannum. Tarannum is when you say something in melodic tune. That's tarannum, when referring to the pitched sound art of cantillation. So one thing you need to understand, in Islamic sound or the sacred sound, you cannot use word ghina or music or singing. You have to be very careful about using word tarannum or qiraat. Qiraat is the most appropriate word when you say that it is the azan or the recitation of the Quran. So qiraat, that's the word ikra came. So although music is such a vital part of oral Arab culture, the Quran is surprisingly silent about music. That's interesting note to learn. Quran doesn't say anything against music. So then you can say, where is this prohibition and all these things come? It's coming on my next slides actually, where this idea come out. So the hadith tradition that the bulk of, so actually where this come from, it is the hadith tradition that provides the bulk of quotations in Islam against or in support of music. So that's the hadith, not the Quran. So how it deal with us. So now the second primary sonic art or the sacred art is the qiraat or tilawat of the Quran. That started in the Meccan era when Prophet he started preaching and proclaiming that he's receiving revelation from Angel Gabriel, and he was sharing these surahs and the Quranic verses, and it was still in the process of tanzil or the nuzul. So the recitation of the Quran without any instrumental accompaniment. So first of all, it is all a cappella, and generally solo a cappella. A qari or a one-man lead this whole recitation. So why it's the qari or the good voice? Because the Quran, chapter 19 says, when the verses of the beneficent, means Quran, are recited unto them, they fall down prostrate in adoration and tears. So that is another idea about the recitation. So I will find out something else for you. Okay, Kirat. And then we can go from the one of the Kirat. Okay, so the recitation of the Quran without an instrumentation. Number 3, religious singer. That's interesting part, because generally religious singers have a special title and a name. You cannot call them, oh, they are a singer or a gospel singer or a worship singer or something. No. Every religious reciter have a special title, especially in Pakistani Indian context, which are religious singers are distinct from commercial singers. The Islamic religious singers, a cappella, unaccompanied, voice-centric singers have unique titles and are celebrated by their respective religious sects. For instance, Quranic reciters are qari. You cannot call them singer. Muazzin is a person who gives for prayer. The Sunni religious singers are Naat Khwan or Hamd Khwan, and the Shia reciter is Azadar. Azadar means a person who did. Now, let me play for you a Quranic recitation.
ألف لام ميم تنزيل الكتاب لا ريب فيه من رب العالمين أم يقولون افتراه بل هو الحق من ربك لتنذر قوما ما أتاهم.
So you can see that he was reciting Surah Al-Sajda, Alif Lam Mim. They are starting with the Arabic alphabets. So this is the Qiraat or cantillation. Generally, there are various cantillation style, primarily like onward from 1960s, 70s onward. Egyptian Qiraat overtook the whole Islamic world because of their cassette print presentation, recordings and everything. But from recent year, from the global contest of Qiraat or Qaris, African, like from the earliest Muazzin, from Bilal, where the Hazrat Bilal came, like Nigerian and I think Ethiopian Qiraat, they are now taking a lead around the world, the style and the cantillation, and that which they call tajweed. So that the art of tajweed, which is Africa-based, is now getting popularity in the Muslim world rather than Egyptian style of Qiraat. Okay. So we talk about 2 canonical sound, a cappella, unaccompanied only by the religious text or azan and the qiraat. But there is a more than to the sacred sound, which is non-canonical. So non-canonical religious music features vocal art in socio-religious space. And there are 3 streams, which we called 3S streams, which I called Sunni stream, Shia stream, and Sufi stream. So these are 3 major streams of sacred sound. Islam all contribute to the religious music culture in Pakistan and also whatever music culture you are around the world. And the genres of non-canonical religious music include Naat or Nasheed in the praise of the Prophet, Hamd in the praise or adoration of God or Allah, Rijziya or Mankabat. Mankabat is in the praise of the holy man, like a Sufi Murshid or a Sufi poet or someone like a Sahabas or the followers. So it's a Mankabat is for a human, not for a divine. And Marsiya is a commemoration of the lamentation on the massacre of the Ali and the friend and the whole family of the Prophet in the Battle of Karbala. So that is where our Shiite sect taken their poetic expression. So the Sunni stream, Naat, Nasheed, or Hamd. So in Pakistan, the subject and theme of Naat are twofold: praising Prophet, Midhat Rasul, and love of Prophet, Ishq Rasul. So that's interesting because mostly in Pakistan, there are slogans by the extremist religious organization, and they make it a phrase, poetic phrase. They said, Ishq Rasul mein maut bhi kabool hai. It means that in the love of Prophet, we can embrace death even. So that's why anything come against the Prophet, which they think is inappropriate or blasphemy, they right away issue a decree or a fatwa, or that's a wajibul qatl, you can kill that person, as we have seen various occasions in the history. So anyway, number 2 is Shia stream. So Shia stream is Noha, Matam. Matam means lamentation or crying. Soz means haunting, and Marsia. So these gatherings for congregational grief, lament, and remembrance constitute a depository of Shia heritage, elucidation, and emotion, and are structured with affective arrangement. Generally, these are most haunting, melodic, where they recall the battle and the massacre of children and men and the army and all these kind of things. So Marsia literally means mourning or lamentation, and Nohas are practice of grief with song. Then we come the Sufi stream, and the Sufi stream is majority Sama, which is Sama means listening or hearing, a spiritual musical concert, which is considered by a Sufi a pathway to encounter ecstasy and experience ultimate reality. The term Sama means both hearing music and the music that is heard. Then Zikr, or a Dhikr, which in Arabic is a Zikr. Zikr in Arabic meaning remembrance, is a formulaic phrase that focuses the mind to God and may also bring about an aroused state of consciousness called hal, literally condition. Hal means present. The person moved their head, and probably they can stand and jumping, and in an ecstatic mode, they can reciting while La ilaha illallah or Ya Rahman al Rahim. And these are the formaic which they call the name, sometimes 99 names of the God, Allah, which mention. And so these are various formulaic phrases which they recited when they come to the zikr. Then the Qawwali, which came from most probably Indian, our context, and Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, the voice of Indian subcontinent Pakistan, who brought Qawwali to the epitome in the musical world. So the Qawwali and their primary source, which they think Islamic and the Qawwal and the Sufis said that it is from the Quran, Surah Al-Zamar 39, which says, so give good tidings to my servants who listen to Al-Qal, the Qawwali which came, the spoken word, and follow the fairest of it. So Qawwali is considered to be a Sufi devotional genre due to its lyrical poetry. However, it falls into a classical musical category in Indian subcontinent. A Qawwal should be just like a Muazzin or a Qari. A Qawwal should be trained in their classical raga-based repertoire. That's where they compose and bring all these Arabic words sometime into local music style. Now, the question of all this, you can say that while we heard that music is haram and Muslim doesn't sing or do that one. So what is this? Is it permitted, haram or halal? As I mentioned earlier, music has an ambivalent place in Muslim societies. On the broader spectrum of Muslim music culture, at the one end, music is firmly rooted in each sphere of society. Musical art has an uncertain status that has become a source of much division in Islam. Misunderstanding, as I mentioned earlier, when you use terminology talking with any Muslim friends, be careful, don't use term music. And selective interpretation of the Quranic text. Various sects of Muslim historically have adopted a definition constraining the use of music as a means of religious expression. Perhaps they believed that music was so powerful attached to the emotions. Now I'm talking about the prohibition, why there is a understanding that it's prohibit. There are various reasons. Number one, misunderstanding of the term. Number two, music has a power of emotions and passion, and so overwhelmingly its ability to speak and move and enamor people, that was detrimental to worship of Allah, probably. Then religious reformers during 8th, 9th century, when the caliphates came and they become a world rulers, and the power and privileges and all the wealth came, and they say that, oh, this ruling class, they are using music inappropriately. That's why Muslim doesn't need to use music, because it will astray you from God's love. So these were various reasons it has been prohibited by the scholars. But as I mentioned, as everything, whatever they practice or adopt or use, they go back to the primary sources, which are Quran, Hadith, and Fiqh. What does all these three things sources say about sacred art or sound? Well, the opponents of music use two Quranic references to claim that music is prohibited. The first is Surah Luqman, chapter 31, verse 6, in which they interpret the word diverting talk, Arab means laghuv or lahv talk, as music. There are some men who buy diverting talk to lead astray from the way of God, quotation close. The second passage used to declare that music is haram is again Quran, Surah Al-Araf, chapter 7. The Quran, that's the two references. You can read what they are saying. But Muslim scholars they are fragmented with the different version and interpretation of these two verses. Like one of the primary scholar in Pakistan, Javed Ahmed Ghamidi, he says that Quran neither prohibits nor explicitly permits music, with understanding that it has been a matter of a place and a people and a reason why music has been practiced. Now, the most definitive collections were compiled by Imam al-Bukhari, which are the collection of hadiths, died 1870, whose Sahih Bukhari is the most famous and frequently quoted by Muslims. Sahih means genuine. So there are quotations almost in the support and against in the Sahih Bukhari or the Hadith. So one thing we came to know that about the use of the music, Quran is silence, Hadiths are differentiate from each other. There is not a unanimous one solution that it's permitted or prohibited. Well, from life of the Prophet, we can see that when Prophet Muhammad migrated to Medina, there is a tradition, all sources agreed on that source, that the girls of the Medina welcome Prophet by singing a song and playing a daf. And what they were singing? They were singing Tala al-Badru Alaina. And that song still available, and still Muslim world sing that song as a commemoration of Prophet Muhammad's welcome by the Medinan girls. So it means that Prophet accepted these kind of exercises and welcome through the local people. And there are various other hadiths which endorse that Prophet permitted use of music for the wedding and for the Eid or for other reasons. Well, so these hadiths reflect that Prophet Muhammad accepted singing and playing instrument at such occasions. Researchers are finding that the majority of hadiths against music have been fabricated or are otherwise unauthentic. So the vote goes toward yes rather than no. Then the third source is fiqh, or the teachers of the law ruling on music. The fuqaha, or the jurist, is always aligning with one of two camps, permissible or prohibited. One of the main name is Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, and his text Ulum al-Din, the revival of the religious sciences. Al-Ghazali permits music, although under certain circumstances. So what is the status of music or vocal art in Islam? So that's a conclusion. Islamic Sharia allows for 4 verdicts on the permissibility of human actions, such as those corresponding to music. Number 1, halal. It means legitimate or allowed under religious law. Number 2, mubha, allowed but looked down on with contempt, as suspect. Actions which may be performed but are not halal and therefore are in a lower category, that is mubha. Then makruh. Makruh is improper, disapproved by religion, but nevertheless not forbidden by Islamic law. And the fourth category is haram, totally forbidden or illicit. So these are four ruling about this one. Even so, attempting to apply these verdicts to music does not yield definitive conclusion, because different schools of law interpret the sacred writing in different ways. An aura of ambiguity has surrounded the legal status of music since early Islam. So it all depends which school of thought, which school, Islamic school of law people belong, whether it's Sunni stream, whether Shia stream, or whether Sufi stream, that it all depends on their cultural context and their denomination or the school of law they are following. And that is for today.
Well, thank you, Eric, so much. Very, very interesting talk where we learned quite a bit about the sacred sound inside the Muslim context. And we're now going to open the floor to questions and answers. If anyone wishes to ask a question, simply put your hand up. There we go.
For in the interfaith context, we need to respect each other's sacred text and also sacred sound.
Thank you very much. Very helpful. I appreciate that. I think we have come to the end of our time today, and I would like to take a minute to thank Dr. Eric Sarwar for a most informative and helpful understanding of sacred sound for Islam. Thank you so much. Very, very grateful. It's my delight to inform you that on March 9, Dr. Diana Matut will be giving us a talk entitled "By the Rivers of Babylon, the Shared Melodies of Jewish and Christian Early Modern Cultures." Dr. Diana Matut comes from the Center for Hebrew and Jewish Studies. And again, the title of her talk is "By the Rivers of Babylon, the Shared Melodies of Jewish and Christian Early Modern Cultures." It will be March 9 at 6 p.m. in GMT time. And with all of that, I wish you all a wonderful day. And thank you again to Dr. Sarwar for his brilliant and informative presentation. See you all next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Blessings.
Bye-bye.